today we express our owlish opinion on another dreaded phenomenon, the midlife crisis. Often wrongly seen as a time when men question their identity and have affairs or buy sports cars, a midlife crisis is actually defined as a period or a phase of life transition when a person begins to question the things that they have accomplished or achieved and whether those same things still provide a sense of fulfillment and meaning. Katie.
That sounds like a dictionary
really
experience
is.
about what midlife. It sounds so daunting. But on the upside,
That's the real definition, Katie.
and then it's also quite sexist because it talks about just about men having the midlife crisis. So for me, I would think midlife, when you spoke about transition, I would think it's far from crisis because a transition means that you're really kind of evolving. But I would think that with women especially, this transition means that there's a new identity for us, like we've previously spoken about, a new identity as older women, more mature women. But that's not a crisis. It should be redefined. We have to find a new
word for midlife crisis.
midlife, because it's purely about we are actually halfway to the rest of our lives. That is what midlife is.
Yeah. Don't you think it's just a reassessment
But
of
why
where we
are they calling it
A
crisis?
crisis.
And I think purely they're calling it crisis is because we look at it and again think about where we are, where we should have been. That's why it's become
It's
a crisis.
an assessment, a reassessment, maybe, or taking stock of.
Where we should be. And I think, again, that is purely because we're not happy with ourselves. But if we're happy with ourselves, I am thinking, I don't know when my crisis was because it was not happening for me if I look at all the, things about what crisis means. I think for me, midlife crisis sounds so daunting. It feels like we're halfway to the rest of our lives. We're going downhill. Already our boobs are going downhill and everything in life should be going downhill. And I don't believe that it is a crisis.
So the description, and I think that's why I read that, because it really is so daunting. And I do agree with you. So, but what I think, and I'll speak about my own experience. I'm now into my 50s and so are you. And
thank you for keep pointing that out.
I must, because this is what this podcast is about. But on a personal level, I really do feel I do take stock. I do question. I do, just check. Am I on the right path still? Am I going where I wanted to go, where I set out to go? Or am I going in a different direction? So I think it's a period of stock taking for me.
Yeah.
For me.
Yes, it is about reevaluating. And I believe that my goals throughout my life I've always had a tick box. We talk about my tick boxes all the time. I've always had a tick box, and I needed to retire by the time I was 50. And that was my one big goal. So where would have had a midlife crisis if I was already retiring at 50? Yeah. So I didn't have time to have a crisis because I wanted to retire early. And I think most of us don't have the luxury because life is throwing us, left, right, and center, throwing us all these challenges that we face. We don't have time for crisis. And I always believe that as women of color, our mothers, our grandmothers, again, I go back to that. There was no luxury of crisis.
It was always crisis, and they didn't even know
Their
it.
whole life was crisis, but the way they graciously accepted those challenges that went through. Not saying that we should just accept it, but I think we have more privileges now to make changes and make differences. For me, it was for me now, and I'm not calling it crisis, is I've always wanted to travel more. I wanted to have hobbies. So I don't think that is a crisis. And
So what would you call it?
I think it's a transition. It's a transition for me. And I don't personally believe that women have a midlife crisis. I think we literally, like you said, we take stock and we're like, where we've gone, we turn back, we look backwards, and we say, oh, this is where we're at. We're supposed to be here, but let's quickly make some changes and improvements in our lives. So I wouldn't want to think of it as
a crisis.
So what we do is over and above taking stock of things, we start making further changes. So we start investing in our health insurances more, as per se, because, a lot of things are happening from a health perspective. So, of course, we start investing in our insurances. We start looking at things that we want to do, as in travel more. So yes, we've traveled a lot in our life, but now we're making a choice of where we want to go. So we also learn to downsize. That's not a crisis.
Not at all. And I've done that. I've actually downsized. I'm almost finding myself in a period of my life where I want life to be more simple.
And downsizing, like you've just downsized your car.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that you can't afford it.
Exactly.
It means you just want to be able to, park your car in a driveway and not having to worry about what's going to happen with it.
And also moving from, as time, there was a time when homes were, it was, you had the children and you had so many family coming. Now I feel like all I want is to lock up and go. Oh, well, I've just inherited a dog, so that doesn't work that well anymore. But for me, it has become about ease and convenience and being able to live a life where I can lock up and go, not have to worry about the garden has to be maintained, all of those kind of things. But so I think you said transition. I feel yes, transition for me, but also it's a period of assessment. And also then acknowledging that I'm entering a different phase of my life, because it is a different phase of my life.
And I think even at our age, we start, and it's not a crisis, we also get up and decide we want to have career changes. We are making different choices now. So, and it might seem as though one of the symptoms is boredom. I can acknowledge that I'm also bored my day to day from a work perspective. I'm like, what are the other things that I haven't done from a work perspective, from a career perspective? So as much as I want to be a storyteller, I never went to film school. Now I want to make films and make movies. So you come to that point where also it's not a crisis. It's an evolution of where you want to, where you think you need to be for yourself, not for anybody else. So my only crisis, I would assume, is that I want to find a rich husband, or I have to be one.
Or you have to be both.
I have to be both. Because again, retirement is at the top of our head. I mean, I joke about it, but it's at the top of our head.
Yeah, how am I going to live when I can't do it myself anymore?
Exactly. So I think, and again, it's not a crisis, it's a planning.
It's a planning.
It's a planning. You're planning for your retirement now. Think about it. We are seriously planning for our retirement. In our 40s, it was, we should plan for retirement. Now we are actioning it.
Yeah.
We assessing our finances, and we are like downsizing things. We're like, but it's really about, we don't want to do what we are doing in our 60s and 70s.
Exactly.
We want to be doing what we love, the freedom of having great friendships and being in a possible retirement village with other people that are having fun and living their best life.
Exactly. And also this period, I actually agree with you. It's really not a crisis. It's a period where you also start focusing more on the enjoyment of your life, because you've worked so hard. I mean, we're still working hard. You still run your business and all of that. But you've transitioned into a period where you actually can now start enjoying the fruits of your labor more. And you're spending more time and maybe even financial resources into enjoying the better things in life.
I've always, and maybe that's a crisis, I've always wanted to be financially independent. My entire life, it is the one prayer I've always made is, dear God, please never let me be dependent on anyone else but yourself. And I think I never believed that as much. And now in my, as I grow older in my 40s, and I'm like, actually, he has not disappointed me, but he's allowed me to make the right choices as well. And when we look at, some people do look at us and think, oh, we have it all. But it's the choices that we've made. So we've sacrificed a lot in the past years. We laugh about not not having partners in our lives and stuff like that. And I think we laugh about it, but seriously, we've
It's also a choice.
A choice
It's
that
been
we've
a
made.
choice. Yeah.
It is a choice. And I think part of this crisis that we talk about is do we feel alone? Do we feel lonely? It's that finding an acceptance, a sense of peace. And that is what we need to go through this midlife that we talk about. And I know that if I'm at the half mark to the rest of my life, I'd rather be at peace with the second half of my life.
Okay. I think often about, there are sometimes or often certain fears that come up. Do you find that? I mean, I have fears of, entering, because now we're half a century in, what is ahead for the next century. Remember, I come from a family that lives for a long time. I had and I just look at my family history, and my grandparents, my grandmothers from both sides my grandmother on my dad's side, on the paternal side, was 107 when she died, and my other grandmother was 98 when she died. And I'm thinking, okay, well, am I going to live for another half a century? And what would that look like? So I think if we're talking about crisis or the fear attached to that, or this transition, for me, the fears would be, how long can I be as healthy as I am right now? I don't want to be old and sickly and in bed. I want to maintain my my health to the best of my ability, and therefore, I guess we put the effort into staying healthy and doing and lifestyle and all of that kind of thing.
Because I think the conversations on midlife crisis is always about the external stuff, and the one big crisis most people have is, if we do live longer, how can we financially take care of ourselves and be healthy? So if anything, those are the two crises. And of course, those are some of the things that we can't control. But it goes back to career. If you look at, being 50 plus, we can't have the same careers as we had in our 20s and 30s. So that's also a huge change. So of course, with that change, we do have some kind of apprehension of what that might look like. Because if we do have career changes, we around younger people, and then we might have these crises because we see younger people differently, and we're like, oh, we don't belong anymore, and we have this sense of not belonging around people with the same. So I guess the career choices, the evolution of our careers are very important, and I think and I believe that people are not ready to retire at 62 and 64. But how does that look like, being 70 and still having to work?
Well, it depends on how. I think it depends on how.
But people don't have choices. People
don't have choices. But I think if you do have a choice, many people actually don't want to stop. Now, I don't know if that means. It doesn't mean you have to work, though. You can keep yourself. There are so many other things you can keep yourself busy with, I think. But you're talking specifically in terms of earning, because you don't have a choice.
Of course. Well, we still are privileged. We have choices. We've had retirement annuities. So if we're downsizing, we can look at our funds. Some people don't have the luxury of that. So unfortunately.
And they end up either being taken care of by children or not.
That's the one thing when I went to Dublin in December, is I found that they have a huge crisis, old age crisis, because people don't want to take care of older people. So there are more people in the streets as homeless people, older homeless people. Number one, their kids don't want to take care of them. They become a financial burden. And those are the things that people are going through. I was in a queue the other day getting my visa. And of course, I'm very inquisitive, so I always have a conversation with someone. And I had this lady who was in her 50s, and I was like, oh, so what are you, what are you going for? And then she says, my son's 20, I'm turning 50, and I decided to make a new career change. And so I said, what are you doing? And she says, I am going on a cruise. I'm going to be working on a cruise ship, And these are the things I don't have to worry about health benefits because they have a doctor. I don't have to worry about food because. And I said, good on you. She says, I've been working my entire life. I am turning 50. So that is not a crisis. That is really finding peace in where she needs to be. She says, I don't have someone in my life. Who knows? I might come back with someone. But for the next 5 years, I have made a decision to go on a cruise. And, I will be in Alaska now. And in 6 months, I'll probably be in Spain. But what she brought that back to is that from a financial perspective, she will be able to save in the next couple of years of our life, but enjoy it. And I love that. And I looked at it and I said, good on you. Because I think that's another thing that we need to look at and say, what are the drastic changes that we could make that might benefit us, but also we will enjoy.
So, listening to you say that, I think the whole midlife crisis is definitely an outdated term, because how I understand it or see it now from our conversation is that there was a time when you reaching 40 or 50, or maybe say 50, there was not much out there for the more mature older person to look forward to or to do in terms of opportunities or things like that. And life actually really, well, they would say life starts at 40, but actually life stopped kind of at 50. And there was not really much more to look forward to, where now we find ourselves in a very different position. Older, more mature people have opportunities, have more to look forward to and to do. So the crisis is actually now really an opportunity.
So we are renaming it and we're saying we are in the prime of our life. So I don't want to hear us talking about crisis anymore. So we're in the prime of our life.
Definitely.
So when we are in the prime of our life, we look back, we assess, we evaluate, we look forward to living the better half of our lives in the best possible way that we can.
Because actually it really is. If you think about it, where we are now, children are gone, out of the house, grown-ups, you don't really need to take care, or you shouldn't really shouldn't be taking care of them. So you really have your whole life ahead of you.
It's like when you are driving on a long journey and you're like, oh, we're halfway there, and then the second half seems like it's you're there quicker. So, but you enjoy the second half of that journey because you know that you're getting somewhere. So as much as we know that we're going to the end of our lives, I think that's the way we need to look at it.
And we can take the scenic route in this phase
and
now.
We can get lost along the way, and we can stop over at some wine orchards, and we can just
and not just head for the destination. We can stop off and do our things,
and that's how I see it.
So it's definitely not a crisis.
Definitely not a crisis. So do you ever think that what we're going through, where they talk about we have some weight gain, we not have sleeping well, that is part of a crisis, or is it just part of our lifestyle, health lifestyle, or unhealthy lifestyle?
Yeah. Look, I think, or I believe, just from personal experience again, I do personally feel that it's more difficult for me to keep my weight under control. If that is something we should be keeping under control for health reasons, I do believe so.
Look, we are rounder around our waist.
No, we are. And that is just one of the things that I feel does come with getting older. But again, I think it's attitude, and it's how we embrace that or not embrace that. If I'm going to get up every morning and make that an issue in my life every single day, then it's a crisis.
Because when you look at the symptoms that you're talking about, I would think, when they say, oh, you're having a midlife crisis, if you are going through lack of libido, depression, weight gain, lack of sleep, I think some 35-year-olds are going through that as well. So I think
for different reasons, but they are. And therefore I agree. So if you just accept that this is where you are, and this is, the era, the period of your life that you have to deal with, and I mean, deal with sounds also like a hectic, heavy thing, but it's about embracing where you are and accepting that this is where I am and I need to make the best of it.
And I think the one crisis I would say that I have is mortality. And I know that, death can be any day. We have to be grateful for every day. But I think that's the one thing that I have. It's a fear. And, we would say a prayer like, dear Lord, give me long life. And then you're like, but I'm worried about this long life because I might not be able to take care of myself in the long life.
How long is that long
life?
But
I think mortality in general, because you are halfway through, is a big crisis that people have. But then again, on the upside is, if we do know that we're halfway there, like we said, is how are we enjoying the journey the rest of the way?
A lot of the crisis comes with how much effort and energy we put into thinking and overthinking these things.
But like we said, there is a silver lining, as you and I both have.
Well, mine is struggling to get to yours.
So my prayer now would say to midlife, please leave me alone. I'm too young for this.
So there you have it. It's not a crisis. It's just a transition. We'll catch you next time.